Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're just going to start our meeting. First and foremost, I'm Councillor Haley. I'm the chair for this evening. Welcome to our second meeting for Scrutiny Panel for Children's Services. Our main focus is just to ensure that our services are effective and it's responsive to the diversity of the communities that we serve in Ealing. Before we start our meeting, I just want to say that we are deeply saddened by the attacks that happened in Manchester today in the Jewish community, and we are very much grieving with the Manchester and the Jewish community. And our thoughts and heartfelt condolences goes out to the victim, their family, and all that's affected this evening. Councillor Oxley, before I continue, do you want to say a few things?
Yeah, I'd like to just say a few words as well. Obviously, it's an appalling act of political violence that's trying to divide our communities. You know, I just think at this time, I echo everything that Councillor Haley said, but I think at this time we just need to show solidarity to other British people. We're all British people. Let's stick together.
So we continue with our agenda this evening. There are any apologies for this evening? We don't have any apologies, do we? No. We have Councillor Alexander and Councillor Kwanzaa online. Unfortunately, we're not recording this at the moment. We're recording the meeting by Teams. Is there any matters to be considered private? Okay, no. Any declaration of interest? Apart, okay, Councillor.
I just want to declare that I have a grandchild who receives some funding from Ealing Council. It's not directly from me, but he does live with me and his father does too. So I just wanted to put it on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jemmy. I also have to mention I work in Children's Services in Hammersmith Council. Last time I did forget, but I remember this evening. And before we move on, can we also approve the minutes from our last meeting? Everybody read the minutes. Are we all agreed? Any? Yeah. Thank you. So no. Thank you, Councillor. Moving forward, we also have to agree the panel's work programme. It's always been emailed us as well. Can we also agree on that as well? Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Today we have Miss Heard, who's the education representative on the Children's Service Scrutiny Panel. We have to have an educational representative. She's a parent governor local school, but we all have to agree, don't we? We all have to agree that we would like to appoint her. You're welcome. She will get. Do you want to say anything? Yeah. So we're going to give the floor to Miss Heard. Miss Heard, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you. Just so that you've got a brief summary of who I am. So my name's Sade Heard. I am a lawyer by trade. Earlier on in my career, I worked for Children's Services for a local authority, mainly in child protection and also in education. I have also acted as a SEND, Special Education Needs and Disability advocate, and provided tribunal support as a volunteer for a number of parents who have children with SEND. Currently, I'm a parent governor for a local school, and I'm also a SEND link and vice chair of teaching and learning. Dual qualified lawyer, so barrister, qualified as a barrister, currently as an in-house lawyer for a healthcare company, and yes, I'm sort of data protection officer and so forth. So in terms of children's services, education, I've got a keen interest in all of that, obviously, and as well as having children attend school as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I was going to ask, your reasons and why did you decide to do Scrutiny Children's Services, but you mentioned that well, so thank you so much for being here. We're not going to bombard you with any questions. We're going to go straight into our reports. We have Joanne Dempster with us, who's the Assistant Director of Children's Social Care, and we have Helen Harding, who is the Assistant Director of Early Help and Prevention. And we all read the reports, so we both welcome them to do their reports, and then we'll take all the questions after you both have presented. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Okay. I'll start with my report. My name's Joanne Dempster, and I provided a report on the update for panel about the progress and the response of Ealing Council to the National Children's Social Care Agenda and the Families First Partnership Programme. So in the report, I kind of set out the timeline of the announcement of the social care reform agenda and when that began, and the subsequent guidance and milestones that have already passed in terms of moving the whole country towards a consistent way of delivering children's social care services to vulnerable children and families. So there are several documents supplementing my report, which have details at the end that tell the story and set out the case for change in terms of looking at whole system reform. In my report, I've explained how the overarching vision of the Department for Education is to establish an end-to-end system of family help, which integrates traditional early help models of service delivery with statutory social care models of service delivery into one, so that we have in the future integrated teams working with children and families across the system who are experiencing need and levels of risk, and teams being integrated in terms of the skills mix that exists within each team to be able to deliver support and help for families of varying degrees. So what the idea is that you would have groups of workers working together who are either family practitioner skilled workers or social workers or therapeutic workers, perhaps from a CAMS background, all working together as a group to deliver help to families in accordance with their needs. And it's recognition really that not all families require a statutory process and a social worker to be assisted and helped. And the most effective help is delivered when a variety of skilled people work together to implement plans alongside families in their journey of help and need. So that's the overarching vision for the Department for Education, which is set out, and we have a timeline by which to clarify what that will look like for Ealing. So the implementation is to start next year, but the planning is to begin now and has begun now, as my report details. So just in terms of the guidance that was released in February 2025, the DFE released the planning for implementation document, which was shared and is published and available online. And this was sent to local authorities to begin thinking about how you would plan to achieve the aims and the expectations that are set out in the Families First Partnership programme. And a series of webinars have been held by the DFE in April and May this year to support local authorities with their thinking and their planning around how this will be achieved. So that's been helpful. A knowledge hub has also been set up by the Department for Education that all local authorities have got access to. So all local authorities across the country are responding to the expectations of the Department for Education in different ways, and there is flexibility and latitude within the guidance for local authorities to deliver their services and implement the reforms in a way that suits their local context and their communities that they serve. So there's recognition that actually what might work for one local authority and the way they've set up their services and delivered them might not necessarily work for another local authority. And across London, there are the 32 boroughs that need to come up with plans and structures and service delivery models, and that might not look the same across all of the boroughs. So as a collective, there is a collective organisation called the London Innovation and Improvement Alliance, which works with all of the London boroughs to think about the London context as a whole, and how our partnership arrangements with our health colleagues and our police colleagues are regional in some respects. So if we think about our police arrangements for safeguarding children, we work with a West London BCU, which covers several authorities, not just Ealing. Similarly with health, our ICB arrangements are with the North West London ICB, and they cover several local authorities. So we are working in partnership with our health colleagues, with our police colleagues, to make sure that we're learning about what the other authorities that come under the umbrellas of the ICB and the BCU, and we learn from them, because otherwise we've got the same health and police colleagues looking at different operating systems across their area, which presents us a challenge. So we're mindful of that from the outset as we move forward. So we submitted a delivery plan, an initial delivery plan to the DFE in first week of July this year. And that set out how we planned to get this off the ground and engage our partners in coming together to form governance groups. So my report talks about presenting the expectations of the Families First Partnership Programme to the Safeguarding Children's Partnership, which is already established in Ealing, and the Children and Young People's Board. So that happened in late June, early July, before the summer breaks happened, and we had a really good turnout and commitment from partner agencies across the piece to nominate people from their respective agencies to come and represent their areas on the operational group and the strategic group, which has subsequently been established with clear terms of reference and dates in the diary now to meet regularly and take forward our plans. So that was successful, and the first Families First Partnership Programme Board launched on the 30th of July. So we had the guidance come out in February, we had the learning webinars held in April and May, submitted a plan at the end of June, beginning of July, and went out to partners and launched our first board at the end of July. So then summer break came, and coming back after that, initial meetings began. So we've had 2 meetings now, and we will go into our 3rd meeting on the 15th of October, where we are currently looking at our demographics and how we understand our population in Ealing. So the first session focused very much on partnership understanding of what the expectations set out in the reform programme meant for them, and sharing information about people's involvement with other boroughs, operational groups and governance groups. The second meeting has taken place this week, and as I said, we've focused a lot on our data and what we know about our families in Ealing from the multiple perspectives that are involved in the planning. So what I mean by that is social care perspective, early health perspective, who are we working with and why, what are the reasons families come to us for assistance and help. And we will be sharing data across health, education and police as well in the forthcoming meetings as we move forward to really get a good grip on what is it that we're seeing happening in Ealing at the current time, and what are the headlines in terms of what we see are the high level needs and the emerging needs for the people that live here with children. So that's the plan. That's where we're up to in terms of the progress. And a report was published in July of this year that sets out an evaluation of the learning coming back from what's called the Pathfinder local authorities. So across 2023, 2024, the DFE made funding available for local authorities to bid for, to test and learn some of the ideas that are set out in the Case for Change. And this all stems from the independent review into social care that was a nationwide review of how social care is delivered and what are the issues and what are the challenges. Josh McAllister led on that review of social care, and the report was published in 2022. So work started to release funds. Local authorities bid for money to test and learn things like family group decision making. How did that make a difference for families? Test and learn integrated teams, family help teams, as was set out, with a focus on prevention of emerging needs and risk rather than reacting to emerging needs and risk. And the learning from some of these test and learn waves, they're called, is back in a summary report that was published in July. And my report highlights some of the key themes and findings, which you can see on page 19 of the pack, which is helping us to think about how we're going to move this forward in Ealing. So there's lots of feedback loops with the national agenda. So we keep up to date with what the DFE are sharing through the Knowledge Hub, through the webinars, through the evaluation reports. But as a London-based authority, we need to keep connected with the other London boroughs to understand how they are approaching reform as well. We have to balance delivering the business as usual statutory duties that we have to children and families with testing and learning anything different that we decide to do. Safeguarding is a really important business, so anything we do decide to test and learn must be with the collaboration of the partners, with our health, education and police colleagues. We cannot do that alone and make changes by ourselves. It could have unforeseen impacts. So we will be enlisting support through commissioned practice leads who will come on board and help us to really think through the plans and how the structures of our resources, our teams, our people, our roles will best serve the families of Ealing in the future. So those consultant leads will come on board this month and work with us for 6 months to take us up to the end of March 2026, by which time we will have a very clear idea of what our structures will look like and how we will be working with our colleagues across the partnership to deliver our safeguarding services for children. The difference that we will see is currently between myself and Helen's services, there is a separation between what is currently early help and what is currently statutory social work. So the two sit separately and receive their work through a front door service. But I think you'll speak a little bit into that, won't you, about your services and how you receive your work. So we've got to overcome that thinking about how our early help services will be integrated with our statutory social work services. And there's conversations to be had about that and taken forward as we work together with the practice leads that will be joining us this month. And I think that will be very important to get right through consultation with our families and consultation with the people that work out in the communities on the ground with families and see them day in, day out. Education is a very important fourth partner in planning for these reforms. They're not a statutory partner, but we're very much inviting them to the table to become a fourth big partner, as they already are in Ealing, to help us think about how we design our safeguarding services moving forward. The word safeguarding will change as well as we move towards a new system. So the words that we will be using to describe the way that we work with our families will be family help in the future. And we're seeing that across London. So we're seeing in the learning that we're getting from the London Innovation and Improvement Alliance that people that have already moved, or authorities that have already moved towards an integrated system that may well have already been operating in that way, have renamed their teams family help and support teams instead of child protection and safeguarding teams. So it's a big shift towards thinking about help and intervention and support for families as opposed to safeguarding and protection. Okay, we're due to submit another delivery report to the DFE in December. So we're working towards that, and with our practice leads coming on board, we have also decided between us, Helen and I, to move additional resource across from the early help service to join the practice leads in what they're doing to make sure that we've got that connectivity with the 7 towns and the voluntary and community sector families who use services across the borough. So we already have that skill set and connectivity, and we're trying to link that up with the independent practice leads that we will be bringing in using the social care prevention grant. Thank you.
Dylan, do you want to come in?
You. So the paper that I'd shared for this evening is just outlining children at risk of coming into care and the role of the supportive action for families in Ealing, known as the SAFE team, and early intervention. So I think, as everybody here is aware, early help is an approach that we adopt in terms of working with families, which is a focus on preventing problems from escalating or tackling challenges before they require statutory interventions. So we know that effective early intervention enables children and families to build on their strengths and to become more independent and resilient to the challenges that they may be facing. And early help is everybody's concern. So when we're thinking about the partnership, the broader partners are very much involved in early intervention. So when we are thinking about the SAFE team, for example, when they are working with families, they will hold team around the family meetings, and depending on the need of the family and what they're addressing as part of their intervention, there may be social workers present at those meetings, health, teachers, voluntary and community sectors, youth services, all dependent on what the need is for the family in terms of trying to put that wraparound support in place to prevent the concern escalating and then require more of a higher end statutory intervention and children potentially coming into care. A lot of the work in relation to early help is very much focused around engaging the partnership. So the early help strategy that's been developed is a multi-agency strategy that's been developed in collaboration with partners and communities in terms of looking at how we adopt a way of working and engaging with families at that earliest stage. We have a vision for children's centres activity, again, in terms of how we're engaging with families at that earliest point, how we're reaching out to families who may have previously been underserved within communities, so that we are making the offer visible to families and in terms of what's available. We also have the connected communities model, which again is about engaging communities, making communities aware of what's available, gaining feedback from communities in terms of what they want services to look like and feeding that into the model of practice. We have the Families First programme, which Joan has just spoken into. And again, that's very much around that early engagement, early intervention, working with families at that earliest point. And we also have, which is detailed in the report, is around the early help assessment and plans. Again, that's more of a universal support for families, which we have seen an increase in uptake of partners being the lead professionals in that. We've for this year, we've seen an increase in secondary schools being the lead professionals. We hadn't previously seen that in the previous years in terms of teachers within the secondary school environments taking the lead on that EHAP, that early help and assessment and plan, and bringing in those agencies that will support that family to work through the challenges. There's some data within the report which talks about some of the SAFE data. So we've received 1,543 referrals into SAFE, and that's up from the previous year. So we see that when we're thinking about referrals coming into the front door, and where we have a daily multi-agency meeting to look at threshold and to see what services would best support the family, that referral pathway would be picked up, and maybe that it's a safe decision for that family to be supported. So we've seen a modest increase there. We've seen step downs from statutory services into the early help space. Again, this has rose from the previous year. So we're seeing that there's interventions at a statutory level, and then we're coming back into the early help space. So there's who can continue with that work in terms of supporting families and engaging them with more universal services. So the trajectory is for families to be able to support within their own networks, and family group decision making may be part of that process, or family group conferences may be part of that process, where families are developing their own plans to look at how they can sustain and not be requiring statutory services, but tapping into those universal spaces. And we've also seen step ups from early help to statutory services significantly drop. So we're seeing that safe intervention is effective for families, and there's that the kind of introduction for families into universal services is supporting families sufficiently. So I think there's also been a lot of work that's been taking place. We have increased our early help assessment and plans training. So that's going out to our partners, schools, health, etc., so that partners are feeling more confident in terms of how they manage the EHAP process and support families, so that it is effective, and then families are able to then manage to access them services independently. And we're also running early help workshops. Early help is a service that does continue to evolve and develop. It's not a statutory service, so we have to identify need, and then we have to commission our services or design our services to meet the family need. So that can be early help can be quite a hard service to grasp and understand what does that look like, because it continually changes. So we're now running workshops and roadshows out to partners externally and internally, so that we're keeping everybody informed of what universal services, what early help services are there, so that the initial response to a family problem wouldn't necessarily be referring into a statutory service, but actually thinking about what's out there, what's available, what can support the family at that earliest stage. So we're continuing to do that. There's also the Best Start for Life Family Hub initiative, or Best Start in initiative that has come forward, and part of that is around Family Hub. So there is some funding that we have available to us to look at how we are to identify a hub space and grow on that early intervention, how we would support that kind of home learning, parenting resources for families. Again, it's all around that support at that earliest stage, and we should be getting notified of what the funding for that may look like for the next 2 and 3 year, but we're currently waiting on that to confirm. So I think generally it's the report just highlights around the vision for early help, I guess, and all the different services that are in place and initiatives, and that real focus and drive in terms of supporting family at that earliest point. And in doing that, we are preventing families from escalating up to statutory services or for family breakdown to get to a point where children are potentially needing to come into care for some, whether that's for respite, whether that's around whilst statutory services work to support the families to come back together, but actually using the early help services to prevent that in the first instance.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Osley, here you go first.
Joanne, just on your paper, first of all, do you get a sense about funding, what we might, because it's all very interesting and you talked a lot about process currently towards implementation, but for this to make a difference, it's going to need resources. Do you have any indication of whether we're going to get some resources as Ealing Borough, or whether, what our level of prioritisation is in terms of the Department of Education?
Initially, the grant that was allocated to Ealing was 1.4 million. I think I say that at the end. So the delivery, that's for the delivery of the reform programme. So that's to get us to a point where we are fully integrated and we've established a multi-agency child protection team, as is set out in the guidance, and we've got a clear way of offering families family-led decision-making options. So that will take us through to March of next year. There's no clear indication yet from the DFE that will be repeated again and awarded again next year. We are hopeful that it will be, and there's positive indications that it will be, but we don't have the confirmation yet that it will be carried over into next year and awarded again. But we are planning for that. Now, in terms of what's expected, delivering family help to families in this way involves a cultural shift in terms of transformation, and that is the learning that's coming back from the Pathfinder authorities. So in the documents that are available around this programme of change, it talks about a rebalancing of the system. So over decades, we've seen reduced preventative services happening for families, and funding redirected towards the higher level interventions with families. So performing statutory duties is what I mean by that. So the things that by law we must do to safeguard children, that involves having qualified social workers in teams ready to receive families going through the system into social work teams where they would have either child in need, child protection plans, or be in care or in court proceedings. So what this means is we take a look at those resources and we look at how we deliver things differently. And what the guidance does is it gives us permission, if you like, or latitude under the law to use roles that we know are really effective in the early help space to work in an integrated way with social work teams. That's what it does. It gives us that opportunity to look at where we've got family support workers, where we've got family practitioners or youth workers or any kind of support roles that we've had traditionally, we can bring those in to larger teams, working alongside social workers, because we know that they have good results with families. So when we can get in and work directly with families and work towards prevention, we've got some really, really skilled good workers, especially in Ealing, who are doing this every day within the existing setup of teams and resources. So I don't think it's about adding into the system as such and increasing our capacity to work with families. It's about reconfiguring and looking at repositioning what we are working with right now and really looking at, do we need the as is model to continue into the future, or can we work differently with the resource that we've got? That's the ask that the DfE have of every local authority.
Yeah, that's okay. Just a quick follow up. So I'm just trying to square what you're saying about rebalancing resources with what the paper talks about, providing universal community services, including family hubs. I'm trying to reconcile that with the fact that officers over the past year and a half have had a plan to reduce the number of children's centres. How does that reduction in children's centres fit with rebalancing resources towards intervention and prevention? And also, how is that consistent with what the Department of Education is trying to do around family hubs?
Yeah. Okay, I can start off. And children's centres is not I'm not responsible for the children's centres, but I can talk about how we offer family help and how we use our places, our locations and our people to deliver programmes and different forms of help. So when we're looking at places like children's centres, community centres, libraries, any kind of place-based intervention, places where we can go to get help, support, information, education, we're looking at value for money and what is delivered out of those places. How we use those places is more important than how many we have, is what I would say from my perspective. Okay. And I've seen this in different boroughs. So, worked in different boroughs. So I understand that it's not necessarily about the number of places that you've got. It's what you are doing within those spaces, what is on offer, how accessible they are to people, and how versatile and flexible they are to be able to deliver what people need. So if you look at the issues that are driving why we are working with families, that's really important. We know that people need advice around their housing and help when they're getting into problems with their housing, help to navigate those pathways. We know that families who have children with additional needs need help to navigate the complex health pathways that might exist when they're trying to get help. We know that people who end up in court proceedings might need support around their parenting. They might need support around their relationships. We know that we've got a lot of families referred to us because of domestic abuse issues. So by the time that comes into a statutory space, into my area, things have escalated beyond a level of safety and there is a need for statutory intervention. But these things, when you look at the trajectory that families have been on, had we got in earlier and had we had things in place earlier for families, we might have been able to divert things away from the need to intervene in a statutory capacity under the law. And we know that if we've got really high functioning spaces, whether that's children's centres or libraries or community centres like I've described, or halls, We've got some good halls in Ealing where we can deliver things from. If we're using them effectively, we can really reach a lot of people. And if we give the opportunity to community groups or community members, champions, what have you, to use the spaces to deliver what works for the communities, then we're going to have a bigger impact. Personally, I don't believe it's about having a lot of places, a lot of children's centres. It's about what you do with what you've got. And sometimes the resource that might be saved or released from reducing buildings can be recycled into more effective ways of delivering services. So that's my take on that. That's my answer to your question. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Councillor Kwanzaa online first, and then we're going to have Councillor Jamu and then Councillor Crawford. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I think I was on two particular teams. I just wanted to ask, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentations.
Councillor Jamu?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Thank you, Chair. Some of my question that I had written down here to ask has actually already been answered, but I wanted to ask, are we sufficiently staffed do we have sufficient resources to cope with the workloads that we have? What sort of a ratio do we have for each caseworker with regards to children? How does that operate?
I can talk about that and tell you a little bit about what has been happening in the social care space over the last 18 months. So last year, an assessment and intervention pilot was set up in April 2024, and that was a set of teams that sit behind what we call the front door, the first point of referral into the service. And that set of teams responds to people who refer in requesting a service to assess the level of risk and the level of need for families. And we've seen positive results there. So we know that the assessments that are done for families accurately assess their needs and their level of risk and will refer on to services that can help families in the community without families needing to come through into the long-term social work system. And our front door service and our assessment service works really closely with early help. You spoke about the daily meetings that you have at the front end. So I think what we've seen in response to that in the long-term teams is stability of volumes of work. So we have social workers across the long-term safeguarding teams. The average number of children that a social worker would be working with is 14. That's a really good number of children, and it's a manageable number of children. And in some boroughs, you would see that number higher than that. So we are proud of our manageable caseloads here in the social care service in Ealing. What we see, and I don't know if you want to talk about the numbers in early help, but I think in the rebalancing, when we're looking at what we've got, who we've got, what finances we've got to deliver this and the grant money and how we can spend it. In the Working Together to Safeguard Children 2023 document, it sets out the permission for local authorities to look at using lead family practitioners to have an allocated number of families who might have previously had child in need plans to work with families at a much earlier stage of emergent need and deliver interventions for families. So they might be going around doing parenting programs with them in their homes. They might be doing family support work, thinking of strategies to manage behaviour. They might be helping families to get connected with their community, maybe accompanying families into spaces that they didn't feel brave enough to access before, and really linking people into their communities. And if we make changes with the reform guidance that we're given, so that perhaps we look at changing the type of workers we have in the service and repositioning our workers and our roles in a more preventative way, we would expect to see less families coming into the social care space and less families needing a social worker to change things for them. I think anyway, and I think the reforms clearly set it out.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Referrals, I was going to ask you, how most of the referrals, how do they come through to us? Is it directly from the families? Is it from the schools? Is it from hearsay? How do they come to us?
So the big referrers, the partner agencies that we rely upon to safeguard children or help families, if you like, the biggest area number of contacts and referrals we get is from the police and from our health colleagues and schools. So those are the three agencies that are the professionals that will send in their referrals of concern for children or requests for help for families where there's need.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Can I come back to you? Yeah.
It was a relevant point. I just thought on these referrals, you mentioned in the paper 26% of the referrals from education. I would find it very helpful just to get the data for all the referrals and a breakdown. Yeah, because I didn't realise the police was such a large proportion.
Yes. Okay.
And also I'd like to see it broken down. When we say educational, I assume that includes the children's centres, so a breakdown of schools versus children's centres as well. You could provide that to the committee.
We can
please.
provide that, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Councillor Crawford, do you want to come in?
Joanne, you mentioned just in a sentence housing, and so I was just a bit surprised that with the multi-agency composition, police and whatever, a lot of what you know, and the potential for doing more visits to homes and looking at addressing behaviours or whatever, that housing also health, if there's sort of damp or whatever, or behaviours, if it all creates stress, I imagine. And so do you have housing in this partnership? I know it's difficult, but to me it's a real worry when there's more demand on parents, to go out to work. There will be children who have nowhere to the older child, to really do homework or read, and there isn't that support possibly for a very busy parent, and it may be a single parent, to do those very things that the nurseries, the children's centres want. And so with the health aspect, damp and mold and whatever, youngsters with ADHD, behavioural issues, and also potential, or the police coming in and looking at any domestic violence and what is, what the impact is. It seems to me that housing should be in this at the, the strategic level, to be there to give advice. And also when, so many families, we touched on this last time, in temporary accommodation. I like the idea that there's going to be, the UK hub, a London hub, maybe a learning hub, sharing information. I'm still worried about, whether we're in a position to monitor what happens to those families that we know could be, troubled families, vulnerable families, when we sent them like up north or somewhere. So get my gist.
I do. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to go? Do you want to answer, or do you want to take another question? She just made it. It was a statement rather than a.
What?
Yeah. Still.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where is ours? That was a question.
Do you want to come in, Joanne, or shall I? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So with housing, it's a work in progress. Our connectivity with our housing colleagues, that particular area has gone through a lot of change in personnel. And I think we're coming to a point now where there are lots of green shoots in our conversations with housing, and communication between us is helping to navigate pathways. I think we've got some examples of that where we've been able to help families understand their options and their pathways. It is difficult, the housing landscape across London. I think you alluded to that when you asked the question. So managing expectations is something that we really need to work on together across housing and children's services, because with families that are in housing need, access to social care and social housing is just not always possible. So it's helping families to understand alternative options to suitable housing. And we see that a lot. In response to that demand, we have plans to have housing support, dedicated officers within children's services to support families who present to us and have extreme housing issues, whether that's rent arrears, eviction notice, or homelessness. So we do work with families where there are issues of housing, and we have dedicated resource to help them through navigating their pathways to get to suitable housing. It does, as you say, cause stress and anxiety for families, and it does impact on children if they're in insecure situations. But these things are not easily resolved and sometimes can take time.
Thank you, Joanne. We're going to try one more time to see if Councillor Kwanzaa is able to speak now, because we couldn't hear her earlier. Councillor Kwanzaa, can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can't. Yeah,
Oh.
we can't hear her.
The question is there. But the question's
So I
there.
can't say if you can hear me. We're truly sorry. We have a major technical issues today. Barlene, Councillor Alexandra, are you able to hear us? If you can, are you able to say something?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, God.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, we both can't hear you. Are you able to type your questions in the chat, and then we can read it out? Thank you so much, Councillor Thompson. I'm so sorry.
It's in there. It's in there.
Can you hear me,
While
Councillor
we sort
Kwanzaa?
that out, can I ask my question? I just want to talk about, I think, Helena, this question is for you. We talked about early help and prevention. I know other boroughs, they practice and they have a special children's centre that's specifically for the family that have children with learning difficulties and learning support and challenges. And within that centre, the early help and the prevention team are the ones that run that particular services. They have the family hub. They have the short break team. They have the speech and language therapists that would come there. We have the OT. We have the physio. We have the neonatal clinics. We have the CAMs that come there. It's one of the specialist services that I like to see all the specialists under one roof to support the family who are disadvantaged, especially SEND, and all the reform that's happening. Do you think with all this plan and all the changes that we're doing in Ealing, are we going in that way? Do you think we will ever have a place in that? I know you're smiling. That would make my day as a councillor, but I'm hopeful if we could ever have a centre just like that. And although that I know that we talked about the children's centre for quite a long time, and I know we just reducing the numbers, and are we in the plan and in the works? Are we leaving core centres, core children's centres that will leave and serve the families that we serve currently? I know we talked about faith group, using the faith group facilities and communities, but sometimes I feel like having a professional identity title, a building with a name that we know that is a universal, rather than going certain sectors, it would make certain communities and family come forward and ask for help. Thank you. I hope that made sense.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Sorry, you hear me? Sorry, in terms of whether we will have a dedicated space moving forward, I don't know that I can really answer that and be held accountable for it at a later date, most certainly. We do have log cabin as a children's centre. We have short breaks that's delivered from log cabin, and we are also we have the YAC, so the Young Adults Centre, and we are looking potentially for short breaks to be delivering from there at weekends. In terms of when we was looking at the children's centres and the early help offer and that improved early help offer as part of the consultation, and we're most certainly recognising that there is a need for increased SEND provisions around the borough, around Ealing in its entirety. I think it's and I think part of that was about recognising travel for families. I think I agree with you in terms of if you have one space, but then if you factor in travel, if there is just one space in a larger borough, then it may be difficult for families to access. So I guess it's something to look at going forward in terms of that SEND space and how and where we deliver our services from and where do families get that information from. I think when we think about the EHAP, so the early help assessments and plans, we've seen that there's been a real increase in terms of supporting families in the early space around SEND need and making sure that families are able to get the services that they need and access the services that they need. And we've seen, like I say, a real increase in that being a criteria for EHAPs, which I think is a positive because it's around the broader the broader partnership, having an understanding of SEND and where families can access those services, how they access those services, as opposed to kind of sitting in one space. But yeah, I think the vision that you shared most certainly sounds positive. Whether we are moving to that as a model or whether will continue their model of kind of services being spread across the space.
I'll follow up my question later. We'll take the Councillor Kwanzaa's question first.
You can't hear me.
To ask about disproportionality and equalities. How will reforms address the overrepresentation of certain ethnic groups in care, as noted in the July meeting?
I think addressing disproportionality, it's important to look at getting upstream ahead of the emerging problems. So going back to the presentation about the report, we are into our second meeting this week around our data, and we need to really pay attention to what the data is telling us. So we know there is disproportionality in terms of children come into contact with statutory children's services. We know that. We have disproportionality within our child protection numbers in particular, actually. And it's how we engage our communities, how we provide early help services that can help families at the earliest point in their hour of need, and not let people feel on the outside of things and left to deal with things by themselves and try to work through problems on their own. I think there is isolation. I think there's work to do to engage communities in Ealing and across all of London. We see this across all of the boroughs. And so the plan that we end up coming up with through reform needs to attend to those voices, and the expectation is that we engage communities in the process. So that is something that we've very much got in the plan of work to take us through to March 2026.
Thank you. I'll let you go first. Councillor Oxley will come in. Ms. Heard, if you have a question, please do let me know. Thank you.
Yeah, question for you, Helen, and Joanne, you might want to add to it. Reading the papers, it's very clear we're moving to this, trying to prevent people going to social care, kids going to social care. And I think around this table, and I suspect everyone is supportive of that. And when we talk about things like kinship networks, so it's a mechanism to try to keep kids with families, you know, I think I support that. My question, though, is that when you move towards, well, in your safe teams and then whatever the new organisation will look like with the new Family First strategy, are there going to be voices in the room, and are there going to be processes that will ultimately protect the child if there is danger to the child? Because there is a danger sometimes in organisations, and I've worked in many organisations, you get a kind of groupthink. The strategy, the director says, we're doing this, we're trying to prevent people going into care. And then a child slips through the net and they get injured or hurt or killed because we haven't actually gripped the issue and taken them away from the family. And I know we don't want to do that, but I'm sure you guys know better than I do that sometimes you absolutely have to do that. And I think as a scrutiny committee, one of the things we almost have a duty to make sure that you have all the checks and balances and risk management in. And I've sort of said this before, but I'm going to say it again because I just think it's so important. And I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that, or perhaps give me, what assurance can you give the committee about that?
So can I just add I had a similar comment. I just want to add so you can take the questions. My question, both teams, Joanna and Helena's team, is I worry about partnership. I know that our partnerships come in various different sectors, but my concern as educator is how then do all these partnerships, how they communicate both in your teams and your departments and our offices and the external partnerships, that we communicate effectively. I don't know why this is echoing, that we communicate effectively so that we don't have children. Sorry, Joanna, that's why. Sorry. So that we don't have, like, as Councillor Oxley said, that we don't have children that, that we might miss out. And I think from experiences and from the families that I support within Ealing, one of the biggest hurdles that we have is the communication between parent and officers. Making sure that we get the right information when a caseload has come through to the system, how it starts off first and how it communicates through all the partnerships and all those professionals that are involved in order to support that family, like we talked about early help and prevention, and then make sure that we keep the families in the loop, because we see a lot of domestic violence that are happening in Ealing right now. A lot of single moms who are struggling, and Councillor Crawford mentioned about the housing. We also have families who are bouncing from school to school, house to house, accommodation, TA accommodation, emergency accommodation, where there's no settlement. They don't know where they will be tonight. And we also see families that are sitting outside our Eden Council Percival House with young families, with young children. And then again, it comes down to, I know we can prevent a lot of these problems, but it's how we communicate ourselves professionally, internally, in order to support our residents. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess it's the talking into, Councillor Oxley, I guess the question that you asked was kind of how we're managing that now, and I guess how we will be managing it going forward. So I guess in terms of when we're thinking about, early intervention, working with families at that earliest point, but as you said, it's about recognising where the concerns have tipped from early intervention and early help support and might fall more into a child protection concern. We're needing to kind of increase that level of intervention and move into a statutory space. So within the paper, the report that I submitted, we spoke about in there around step up and step downs. So and that's kind of looking at within the safe space. So we spoke about, so step ups from early help to statutory services has dropped significantly. So from 129, 23, 24 to 71 in 24, 25. And that's really positive for us that it has dropped, because what that would reflect is when families and the referral for whatever the concern is, whether that's domestic abuse, housing, whatever the concern might be for the family, when it's coming into the front door and that initial screening, and when we're thinking about those meetings that are taking place, those discussions, maybe some of the strategy meetings, the decisions that are being taken is the right decision, because the figures are showing us that actually we're getting it right. Families are remaining within the early help space and numbers are reducing in terms of needing to go up and receive statutory services. So that's about that curiosity at the point of receiving that referral and making the correct decision against the threshold of what service can best support the families. But whilst that's positive, with step up and step up, that potentially means a change of work for the family. So whilst early help and the safe team may have been working with the family, they've developed a relationship, hopefully built some trust in terms of being able to be honest, and whether that's again around domestic abuse and being able to share your story and feel confident because you're building that trust. And then we recognise there might be a further concern and it's going over to statutory services. It can be a disjoint because the relationship needs to develop elsewhere. And that's very much where the family first kind of model comes in terms of families accessing a service and there being a consistent worker. And then what you would have is that oversight of a social work professional in terms of supporting and making sure that that family is kept safe. I don't know if you wanted to speak a bit more into that, Joanne, and that's kind of the model we're working to, because we want to make sure those children are safe, but also that we're not interrupting the relationship and the storytelling in terms of what the families are sharing with that professional person working with them. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Just in terms of like thinking beyond the step up and step downs, and you talked about the strategy meetings, and auditing is really important, quality assurance is really important, and we've got a strong framework in place to have that oversight of what we're doing. The feedback, if you look at the evaluation report that was published in July from the Pathfinders, who have tested out things like the multi-agency child protection teams, and if we look to the Pathfinders in London, like Lewisham and Redbridge, who are on their way and well established in terms of having these reforms realised, the existence of the multi-agency child protection team is helping to keep that oversight and that tracking of families where there are children in need of help and protection. So what you see is teams of family help workers responding to emerging need And where there is very high level risk, you have a multi-agency child protection team that take responsibility, who will oversee the strategy meeting, chair the strategy meeting, and do the child protection investigation under Section 47 of the law. And that is done alongside whoever is allocated to work with the family on a long-term basis. So you have a joint approach to managing risk. And it's the feedback coming back from the Pathfinder agencies is actually the worker is feeling supported to understand the risk and intervene and put safety plans in place for children more effectively, because they don't feel like they're holding that by themselves. So having that team of experts running alongside the social worker or family help worker, whoever it is, who's working with the family on a long-term basis, is proving to be effective in keeping that healthy challenge around recognising risk and providing the most appropriate response. Under our current way of working, we know that families that go through assessments under the Child and Family Assessment route, or families that experience child protection investigations, there is quite a significant proportion of families that at the end of an assessment do not require further involvement with services. So we're looking at that statistic, and we're looking at families who've gone through child protection investigations under Section 47 of the law, and the proportion of those families who at the end of that process head to a child protection conference, because there's quite a large proportion of those families as well that don't end up at a child protection conference. So the hypothesis is, are we following processes for families unnecessarily? And that's a question that we need to answer as a partnership. Really looking at this through the process of reform, because we shouldn't, whilst we should be and absolutely should be protecting children who need to be protected and brought in to care if they need to be, we also shouldn't be putting families through unnecessary assessments and unnecessary processes. We should be trying to clearly identify the needs and put in as much support as we can to try and overcome those needs using early help and community resources.
So I just got two simple questions. I think Helena, I think it's probably for you. We, in terms of the early help and prevention and supporting families, you mentioned earlier, we normally have parent training for parents or parent support. What type of parent training specifically do we have parents who are needing support? And one of the questions, my second question is regarding, we always talk about safeguarding children from home perspective and family's perspective, but if we flip it and we talk about children under our care when we work in education, for example, under schools, if a parent feels, for example, their child is not being protected at school and there's been constant incidents that have been happening specifically in one particular school, how then parents are they able to report their safeguarding concerns about their child to the local authorities? Does that make sense?
So, so your first question was around early help and prevention and the parenting interventions that are available. So there is a range of parenting programs and interventions. So we have from baby massage, which you could classify or is classified as a parenting intervention. It's around the bonding, which is really important at that earliest stage. And there's multiple programs and workshops available for parents between that and a program that we would run called Nonviolent Resistance, which deals with much more kind of escalated higher end behaviours, whether that's around external or internal within the family. So there is a range of parenting interventions, programs and workshops across all the age ranges to support families. Some of those are delivered face to face, and some of those are delivered as part of a digital offer. That's something that we have heard through part of the consultation, engaging with the communities, that there's that kind of balance between the two that families would like. Some we run in the evening. We had one over at Westside that was running on a Wednesday evening for families to come in. So, you know, kind of putting childcare in place. So it's a broad offer. I think it's fair. Like I say, both face-to-face and digital. In terms of parents being able to raise concerns, absolutely, parents can refer into the front door. There is a what's the word I'm looking for? Not a consultant.
The ladder. The ladder.
Yeah, I was thinking about calling into the front door and having that initial conversation as well. Consultation. A consultation line at the front door, where families can call in and kind of gain that knowledge from there in terms of what they might guide them to do, or whether there's a concern, we would take that forward. And as you've just said, do that ladder referral if the concern felt that was the correct process to follow.
My last follow-up question, regarding going back to, sorry, I'm a little bit obsessed with the training course. You said baby massage. Do we do anything parent training specifically for parents and families and carers that children have got SEND needs? Signet or porter training. Even our officers that work with SEND children, do they go on those kind of training? For example, autism. I know that they do a lot of. Is it Ealing Learning Partnership, I'm thinking? But I haven't came across any porter training in Ealing. Do we even have a porter training specifically designed within Ealing to support families in need?
I want to say yes, because I'm sure I have seen that that's available for families, and again, I've seen we've had the recent SEND inspection, and I think that's kind of been pulled up through there. But I can definitely get that back to you in terms of what is available specifically, because I don't know the specific details.
That would be really great. And the Signet as well. If you could email me, that would be really nice. Thank you.
I would, absolutely.
Councillor Oxley. Anyone, any questions? Oh, sorry, I forgot about you, Councillor Janet.
Chair, declaration of interest. I think I should let you know that I am a governor for a primary school, and I do sit on subcommittees where children in need. So I just wanted to make sure that was on record as well. And the other thing, and it's my last one, Chair, if that's okay, is actually outside of the remit here. But I just wanted to know in general, I mean, we've got 32 London boroughs, and every borough has different needs. Just like every child has different needs. But I just wondered if there were like figures as to where we fit in amongst the 32 London boroughs as to how many children we are looking after in comparison with other London boroughs. I just wondered if you'd, yeah. As I said, sorry, nothing to do with the report, but I was just interested to know. Thank you.
Do you want to come?
Thank you. So just in terms of Ealing and the numbers of children in care, so as of today, we have 281 children in care, and the measure that's used to look at the proportionality of that is how many children per 10,000 we have in care, and that's what's looked at by the DFE across all local authorities. So when you look at Ealing, that equates to around 34, 35 children per 10,000 in care, and we're low in comparison with other boroughs, and we are below our neighbouring boroughs, and we are below the national average as well. So in terms of how we perform in terms of looking after children, and you could look at that in many ways, is we are quite good at keeping children with their families. So of the children that do come into care and need to be looked after, they are the children that absolutely require care from the local authority. And some of the children that have exited care, they've gone home to their families. or they've gone to family, friends, or family members. So we're very much in the space of assessing kinship carers or connected people to children, to make sure that children grow up in their family and friends network.
If there's any no more questions, we're just going to move on to Ms. Heard, go ahead.
Thank you. I think this might be for Joanne. Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that I think it's around mid-October, you'll be looking at demographics and population. And sort of building on, because I think other councils have already asked some of the questions that I had intended to ask. In terms of overrepresentation of certain individuals in relation to statutory interventions, is the intention that there will be a focus on that element within those meetings and sort of the consultants that you bring in?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's part of looking at all of our data across early help and the statutory space as well. Yeah.
Sorry, one more question as well. Also, you mentioned collaboration with the police and healthcare, and naturally there is quite a lot of statutory intervention from the police and or healthcare, I would imagine. Are there any perceived blockers in terms of data sharing between the organizer, between the police and healthcare and yourselves? And are you anticipating that may slow or sort of slow down any particular, I don't know, the path of implementation, or sort of slow the speed?
At the moment, looking at what we do now, Ealing's got a really well-functioning MASH service, multi-agency safeguarding hub, which has representation from the police and from health, and information sharing agreements already exist amongst the partnership, that's overseen and governed by the safeguarding partnership. So I think the foundations are in place. It's as part of the reform programme that does fall within the remit of planning. Of course, it will, if we are to establish true multi-agency teams. They will have statutory partnership representation within them. But building on the success of the MASH and being able to triage referrals that come in with access to intelligence systems across those agencies already, we've already got a strong foundation upon which to take that forward. So I think the working together to safeguard children guidance is clear that information sharing should not prevent the safeguarding activity that needs to take place to safeguard children. And I think it's upon that premise that multi-agency child protection teams are operating in the Pathfinder authorities and will operate in the future. But we need to work through the logistics and the detail around what future information sharing agreements will look like. That will be part of the change and the transformation work.
I think this one might be for you, Helen. Obviously, Joanne, please speak up if it's for you. In terms of SEND, I'm sure you're probably aware that there are a number of parents and carers who do at some stage receive some sort of SEND diagnosis for their children. Will there be any sort of early help and prevention for parents or carers where they've got children that they believe may have a special education need, but are having difficulties in terms of either accessing or it officially being recognised?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's a lot of the support that comes through the EHAP process, the early help assessment and plan. And I think that's there's been like I said, there's been a real increase in that space in terms of supporting families at that earlier stage where there is emerging potentially emerging send need for the family, and then supporting the families and making the appropriate referrals into the services to best support. And like I said, we are seeing a real increase there, which I see as a positive, because it's around that training program within those earlier settings like children's centres, etc., to help families and respond to the families' queries and identify that and support that through that EHAP process. So yes, most certainly, like I said, there is definitely an increase in that, which is a positive, so that families are accessing those services at the earliest point. We also have an early speech and language programme that is delivered again out of the children's centre, so that earliest stage that will support early identification where there might be an emerging need coming through, and sometimes that's supported through that early intervention of the SORT programme, or if there's at the end of accessing that intervention, if there's still concerns, again, there's that pathway into referring into the appropriate services.
Thank you so much, Helen and Jaban, for your time this evening. Before we conclude, is there anyone that would like to make any recommendations or suggestions? Councillors online, do you have any recommendations that you'd like to put forward this evening before we conclude? I know you can't hear us, but we can't hear you. If you could put it in the chat, that would be really good. That's it. Thank you so much, everyone. Helen and Joanne, thank you so much. Have a good evening, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I guess just to confirm, I'll take forward the action and come directly back to yourself in terms of what the send parenting offer is.
Yeah, you can email me direct. Thank you so much, Helen. And the data that, yeah, so that data can go for all of us. But my question, you can send it to me directly.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.